Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Good morning, good evening. The best advice I was ever given. How to make money. How to make money is a relevant term to the best advice I was ever given. This is Drive Time, and I'm Dave, and I'm just the driver. I drive the business and the industry that I'm part of. I drive my own business. I keep control of my own markets. I buy, I sell, and I make money. The best advice I was ever given by a really good guy. The best guy. And my opinion about him hasn't really changed in all these years. I had a stepdad, and he was the best dad, whether he was a step or not, that I could have ever hoped for. Way better than whatever I could have imagined my real dad being, my biological father, whatever he amounted to. My stepdad gave me one piece of advice out of all the years that didn't do anything until I was about 40 years old. So he gave me advice 32 years ago. And he said, son, I can teach you how to do everything that I do. It's never going to make you better than I am. I can't teach you how to be better than I am. You have to figure that out on your own. You have to figure out how to be better than I am. And I just said, okay. What was I supposed to say other than okay? I had no idea what that meant. I realized that a lot of people, they end up in a position they don't want to be in. The people that they followed or taught them or helped them couldn't actually help them to be better than what they were. And so you had to find someone who could help you, lead you, show you to be better than they were. And so my stepfather, he taught me everything he knew about everything that he knew. He said, the first thing I want you to know how to do is drive a truck. Big rig, 18-wheeler, rubber duck and all that. And I said, okay, I'd love to learn how to drive a truck. He goes, but I don't want you to be a truck driver. I want you to know how to drive a truck. Okay. Pack a bag. We're leaving in a couple hours. Oh, okay. So, so I was 18 at the time. You're not going to drag a 16-year-old off driving him around in a truck, right? Just so make sure that there's no comments about that. Got it. All right. So 18 years old, we're going to go for a truck drive. Pack a bag. And I didn't think, okay, well, we'll be gone a couple days or whatever. Typically, he's only gone for a couple days. So I tell my mom, hey, Dwayne's going to take me for a drive. He wants to teach me how to drive a truck. 30 days later, we were returning home from our truck driving lesson. 30 days, we traveled from Florida to Texas, up to Oklahoma, out to Kansas City, back over to Ohio, down to North Carolina, and all the way back to Florida. That's what we did. And in those 30 days, I did learn how to drive that truck. And we got home, and my mom's like, well, how was it? You guys were gone a long time. I saw a lot of things and experienced a lot of things. just visually experienced things that you could not see without making that drive. And the one thing that he did for me that I don't think a normal person would do, but because it was me, he simply said, our destination is Dallas, Texas. We have 4 days to go from Tampa to Dallas. Here's the map. Plot the course and tell me how we're going to get there, and I'll get us there. That was what he said. So I said, oh, okay. So I, open the map up and I start looking at all the roads, and well, there's one way out of Florida, so we got to go up 75. We got to get on Interstate 10, and we're going to cross over the Panhandle in Florida's Panhandle, and Alabama, and then once you get across 10 in Alabama and you go through the tunnel, there's a tunnel, and I got to be honest, I was a little scared the first time I went through the tunnel. It was a little scary. I got to be honest about that. Once you get in Alabama, he said, that's when you can make some really good decisions. He said, I've driven every one of these roads, whether I did it on purpose or on accident, but I want you to see, you choose the path. I didn't understand at that time what he really meant. It had little to do with the roads that we were going to drive, and a lot to do with the journey and the path we were going to take to get there. We had the beginning and the end. The journey and the path were my choosing. And I chose the craziest route you could imagine to get us there. But we were there in 4 days, and across those 4 days, I got to see some beautiful and amazing country. And I also got to see how people got to live. And in some cases, I didn't understand it. And it was sad. People were living in no more than shacks. And then we'd go through the city and you'd see people living in a high rise. And so now you understand why I talk the way I do and I sound the way I do. Because I truly came from nothing. And that was the first journey and the first time I got to pick the path. The lesson was to understand where you're trying to get. You can't go blindly. You can't just guess at where we're going to go. We had a destination in mind. And how we got there was a complicated route. Sometimes we would have to travel slow because of the speed limit. And sometimes we got to go fast. Fast always led back to slow. We go from a narrow path to a wide path. So you see, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about roads or the paths that we take in our everyday life. It's almost always the same. And I always say the numbers are the numbers, and the numbers don't lie. So when someone says I'm doing $1,000 a day, be able to back those numbers up. Explain that math, whether it's 1,000 a day or 10,000 a day, or those numbers get arbitrarily large, and it doesn't really matter, but everything about them has to add up. And I learned how to drive a truck. And what I learned was I never wanted to drive a truck. But I got to see a lot of things that may have influenced, may have given me some insight. Getting to walk in the warehouse of a distribution center that was 100,000 square feet and seeing how they handled the material and the processes, that was eye-opening until you've ever seen a business that big. And then to know that that was just one of 100 warehouses they had, and that they moved product from building to building using tractor trailers, and then sorting systems and conveyor belts and people. Compared to now, everything still moves via tractor trailer, with conveyor belts and sorting systems, but not many people. A lot of automation. And the lightning speed at which orders can be processed and inventory can be pulled out of warehouses. It doesn't matter where that warehouse is at now. The closest one to the end result or the end point. So I learned to drive that truck, and I never understood the lessons that he was trying to teach me, because he wanted to teach me how to be better than him, but he didn't know how. And years later, sadly, he passed. And he was old then. He was when I was 18, he was almost 70. And so years later, I asked my mother, because I didn't understand, what does it mean? What did he mean? And she said, I don't know. Because I couldn't ever teach you any more than I know. So she had no clue. So it took all these years for me to understand the keys to the success. We're always asking questions and actually learning. Learning, and primarily learning from my mistakes. When I make a mistake, don't keep making the same mistake over and over and over. And if you do, implement a process to teach yourself to not do it again. And you have to get better, and you have to get more efficient. You have to open your eyes and understand so many things around us and what they actually mean, and if it's real or not. Is it true? And here's a good example. Across my Facebook news feed, some of my Facebook friends made a comment about us launching missiles at Syria. And then made a comment about how Russia has sent warships in to where we were at. And that how we're going to end up in a war with Russia. And as much as I want to respond to these people that are my friends, I don't even bother. Because what they didn't understand was Russia agreed with us that what Syria had done was wrong, and they were sending those warships in to back us up as a show of force. So Syria would understand what they've done isn't going to be taken lightly. These are the things that when people pass around the propaganda, the malarkey, when people say, again, I'm going to go back to sales. When someone portrays to you that they're doing $1 million, and $1 million in sales is $90,000 a month. To do $90,000 a month at 10 or 20 or $20 items, do the math. How many items do you need to sell a day or a week to achieve $90,000? How many items does it take? And then you have to ask yourself the next very important question. What would it take to replenish that rolling inventory? See, that's the important question. I say that's the important question, but they're all important questions. Because these things keep coming up, and people email me, and I love all the emails. Just, you can send me all the messages, and sometimes I directly answer it, and sometimes I indirectly answer it, or I tell a story about it, because I don't want at any point in time to hurt anyone's feelings. I've had my feelings hurt. One time a guy come and asked me what I was doing in sales, and I told him I'm doing $4 million a year. And this guy emphatically said, there's no possible way you're doing $4 million. The numbers don't add up. The life don't add up. Nothing that you do adds up to $4 million. And I said, well, that's weird because you don't know me. And he goes, well, all right, well, how do I know you're doing $4 million? I'm like, well, the sales number is only the sales number. The real question is, Am I making 1%? Am I making $40,000 a year? Did I say I'm making $40,000 a year? I'm selling $4 million a year. And if I'm doing $4 million a year and I'm only making 1%, well then don't run around hiding behind that $4 million number, because all you're trying to do is make yourself look like something you're not. And that goes back to the honesty of doing good business. So I said, well, I do $4 million a year, and I'm making more than 1%. And at the time, I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to discuss this with you. Why do you even want to know? And he said, because Dave, at some point, everyone and everything, even a dog walking up the street, he's going to question you. And you better know how to answer that answer. And I said, why? What difference does it make? He goes, I can't explain that because I can't teach you how to be better than me. But trust me, you're going to need to know how to answer that question. And I said, okay, well, how do I answer the question? He goes, I don't know, because I don't do $4 million in sales. And that's why I was asking you. Because if I got to where I was doing $4 million in sales, I'd want to be able to answer the question. And I said, okay, I got you. I understand. So to answer that question, statistically speaking, according to the U.S. government, most companies net out, not gross, net out after everything 8%. So after everything, if I were doing $4 million, I'm probably making 8%, which means that I would be making, I don't know, I can't do the math, but if I had to assume I knew what 8% was, it'd be $300-something thousand if I was doing $4 million. So in your adventures in this life, as you meet people and you follow their advice, I'm going to say it again. Make sure that their advice comes from some sound business experience. People talking about business or things that they've done or can do, in theory, makes you a loser. Because whether it's somebody on YouTube or some blogger, or it doesn't even matter if somebody's on TV and they're talking about numbers, and they're talking in theory, theoretically, if I made $4 million, I should be making, $1 million. But in fact, it's highly unlikely that that's the case. So understanding the numbers and the gross percentages versus the net percentages, and then understand what it actually takes to achieve those sales numbers, those are big numbers. You need to sell a lot of stuff. And as an example, if you were selling $10 items, you'd have to sell 300 of them a day to do $90-something thousand a month, to do very close to $1 million to a little over $1 million a year. If you were selling $10 items, what are you making? What are you buying them for? We can guess, but really if we just apply our 8% rule, well, then we have a good idea of what they're making. And if they're making more, well, that's great. That's amazing and that's awesome. But as a basis, that's where we start. We can do the division, whether it's $10 items, $20 items, $50 items, or $100 items. And then the percentages are going to vary, or they don't. Because it just depends on many other factors, on the volume of the business. Maybe they're not $100 items, maybe they're $500 items, and they don't have to sell very many, and they're buying them for $1, and they're rich. I don't know very many of those companies. Because I'll always back it up and say, let's look at Apple and their $800 iPhone, and what the manufacturing costs are, what the carrying costs are, what the return on the investment is against all the components, all the engineering, everything it takes to develop that one product. Oh my gosh, they're selling these phones for $800 a piece. Yeah, well, they've also sold 300 million of them. So it doesn't matter. They've got $200 billion in the bank. So it gives us an idea. And if you do the math against the number of phones they sold and you apply your 8% rule, you're going to get really close. So the math is always the math. That's Just the lesson that I've learned. The other lesson that I've learned was the best advice I was ever given. You have to be better. And if you don't know how, you have to try, you have to want it, you have to look to succeed. You have to raise your standard to understand what it's going to take. Because you may not always be a $500 a week guy or a $1,000 a week guy or even a $2,000 a week guy. The differences are, be who you are, but you have to be honest and understand what it really takes to be professional, forthcoming, clear and concise. I'm Dave, and this was the best advice I was ever given.